We welcome Mr. Kamal Rawat to MIT University Noida Department of Computer Science and Engineering, MIT School of Engineering and Technology, who has done with more than 15 years of experience as a software design architect with an experience of 15 plus years in the renowned company by the name Microsoft and Adobe. He is also a founder of Ritambra Technologies. Sir has an experience in machine learning, image processing, algorithms, mobile application. Mr. Rawat is a member of Career Advisory Board in multiple colleges and universities as a counselor. He has conducted many seminars and workshops. He has published more than 7 books. We welcome you, sir. You can start with the session now. The session is regarding object-oriented programming concepts and opportunities connecting to emerging technologies that will be really beneficial to our students who are into the 3rd semester and they have got prior knowledge of the OOPS concept. Because OOPS is basic. If we are going with the technology, then industry actually requires the platform where they can work with Android app, with machine learning, with Python, with Java. So that will be beneficial for them, and I hope students can have many takeaways through this session. We welcome you, sir, again. You can start with this session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. I request you to be online in the conversation so that I make sure that the internet is not down, right?
Right.
And feel free to bring the questions in between. So I will not be looking at the questions. I'll be probably talking, right?
Yeah,
So
I always request my students to put on their camera. I always request, and they are very good students. You can also encourage after the session, they will be asking you the questions. It will be very interactive session. We really own them. I
sure.
request my students to kindly please turn on your camera, please. Thank you, sir. You can start.
Yeah. So before starting, I would like to say that I have tried to make this session futuristic. Plus, at the same time, I have tried to make this session as relevant for students as possible. And I have added a job angle, looking at what kind of jobs can we look at from object-oriented point of view specifically, right? Though object-oriented is not a job profile in itself. Object-oriented programming is not a job profile in itself. The job profile is usually a software developer. But if you look at it, then there is one job profile which is very niche, and that job profile is related to API development. So when we talk about API development, we are talking about how how our code will be consumed by other people, and there object-oriented programming comes into picture, right? So I'll be talking more from that angle. All right. I'm assuming certain things. I'm assuming that you guys already have some basic understanding of OOPS concepts. Like, you guys already know what a class is. A class is essentially a type. Like we have integer type, float type, double type, character type. We have user defined types also. Like, you can create a class student. So that class student becomes a type. That class student may have operations. That class student may have properties. So if I say integer x, then integer is a type. If I say student A, then student is a type. I can, we can store some values in x. I can say x is equal to 5. Similarly, here we can store some values in student. So I can say that, the a dot name is the name of the student, a dot age is the age of the student, or maybe roll number or anything. So these are the properties. Similarly, we can perform certain operations on a type. So I can say x plus plus. We can, in the same way, we can perform certain operations on students. We can say a dot maybe print address. So this operation will print the address of the student. Right? The syntax may be different, but essentially we are declaring a type. We are defining a type whenever we are defining a class. Now, when we are defining a class, when we are defining a type, this type may be having some common things from the already defined types. So this type may be an extension of the previously defined types. So if it is an extension, it means that we are using the properties of the previously defined types. Maybe student is a person. So when we say student is a person, it means that a student also has all those things. Now, this inheritance here is a relationship which I assume that most of you are aware of. Whenever we are inheriting something, the inheritance can be either an inheritance of implementation or an inheritance of interface or an inheritance of both. If you look at it from C++ point of view, then inheritance of implementation means that you are privately inheriting a class. So if you are privately inheriting a class, then everything that the parent class has goes into the private part of the child class. If it goes in the private part of the child class, it means that this particular class has all the things of the parent, but the object of this class will not have anything. Object of this class will not be able to access anything of the parent, right? It means that we are inheriting the implementation, but we are not exposing the interface of the parents to the outside world. And if we are exposing the interface as well as the implementation, then we say that this is a public inheritance. So in public inheritance, if I have a function in person class, let's say I have a function, maybe ABC or func inside this person class. So if I create a student object A, then I can access the functions of person class using the object of student. It means I'm using the interface of person class and I'm accessing the interface through the student class, right? So I repeat it again that class is just like a type and object is nothing but variable of that type, right? We are more comfortable with the variable terminology. So object is nothing but variable of this class type. Encapsulation essentially means that we are putting all the operations and the properties together in one at one place. So encapsulation is nothing but bucketization of the properties and operations of a class. So when you say class student, pardon me for my handwriting. So because we are putting everything inside these curly braces, it means we are student is encapsulated. All the operations, everything related to student is encapsulated here. All right. Then next comes abstraction. So when we say abstraction literally means that we are hiding the implementation details. Now imagine, let's say I want, let's say I have a servant and I want that servant to bring me apple. Doesn't have a name. So if apple doesn't have a name, then what will I call him? I will have to say that bring a fruit which is red in color, which tastes sweet, right, which is round in shape. So I'll have to say all those things. And even after saying all those things, it is possible that he may end up bringing strawberry rather than apple, right? So the name apple is actually providing an abstraction that is apple. So when I say apple, it means that I'm conveying all the messages without saying the details. I'm not providing any detail. I'm just using the word apple. So same is abstraction. So when we say abstraction, it means that we are hiding the implementation details and yet conveying the entire message, right? So if you go at another higher level of abstraction, then fruit is another higher level of abstraction, right? So abstraction is good as long as it is up to a certain level. So if you ask your servant that bring me fruit, then chances is that he may not bring apple, he may bring banana, right? So if we go to a higher level of abstraction and hide more details than we should be hiding, then it is possible that the message is lost. So when we say abstraction should be up to a point that it is hiding the unnecessary detail. And abstraction, we should not be over abstracting that it is hiding even the necessary details, right? All right. So I'm not very used to monologue, right? I hope that this is clear. All right. Next concept of object-oriented is programming is polymorphism. So polymorphism comes in different flavors. Polymorphism essentially means that one thing has multiple forms. So if I am saying that sum 2, 3, then this is having integer addition. And if I am saying sum 2.5, 3.6, then this is performing double. This is performing the summation of double values. So it is not that polymorphism was not there. Polymorphism has always been there, right? In C language, if you say 3 divided by 2, then the answer will be 1. And if you say 3.5 divided by 2, then the answer will be 1.5, right? So even in C language, we can see that polymorphism is there, right? When both the operations are integer, then the result is also integer, right? And when one of the operations is real number, then the result is also a real number. It means that in these two cases, the arithmetic and logic unit is performing operations knowing the fact that either it is performing the integer division or the double division, right? So it means that polymorphism was already present. It is just that it was not exposed to the user, exposed to the developer. What C++ or object-oriented programming does is that it exposes the polymorphism which was already present to the developer also. So if I am creating my student class, or I can write two functions. One will take integer parameters, another will take double parameters. The name of both the functions are same. So these functions will have intelligence that if the function is called with integer parameter, then first function will be called. If the function is called with double parameter, then second function will be called. Right? So this is polymorphism. Another flavor of polymorphism comes in the form of late binding or dynamic binding or runtime binding, which means that we can have, if we have a structure like this, then I can create the pointer to a person class. So I can create a person pointer P, and inside this person pointer, I can have a student object. So it means that on the heap, there is a student object. So this is on the heap. So on the heap, we have a student object, and on the stack, we have a pointer, which is person pointer. And this person pointer is pointing to student, right? So when we say, let's say employee is also a person pointer. So P can point to either an employee or a person. So the function, the actual function which will be called will be either related to employee or student, depending on whose object this P is holding. So person is a class which is inherited by employee as well as student. And if it is a person pointer, then it has the knowledge using virtual function mechanism that it will call the function of the relevant class, and it will not call the function of the parent class itself, right? You must have read it in polymorphism and all right. So this is just like the revision of your object-oriented classes that you have already done. I will be discussing this part, which is interface and implementation, in rest of the maybe 20-30 minutes, whatever I have. For the sake of simplicity, I am taking stack class, right? Is the students familiar with the stack data structure?
Yes, they are.
Great. So let's say we want to create our own class, right? So we want to create class my stack class. Don't worry about the syntax. I may be using Java syntax or C++ syntax. The thing is that we want to create our own class, which is my stack class. Now we can create a stack using either a linked list implementation or an array implementation. Let's say if we have a stack using a linked list implementation, then, so I'm just revising the concept. So stack has a push operation, which is nothing but inserting a value. It has a pop operation, that is nothing but removing a value from the stack. And maybe let's add one more operation, is empty. So is empty will check if the stack is empty or not. So if I'm pushing 5, then 5 will be pushed. If I'm pushing 3, then 3 will be pushed. Now if I pop out, then 3 will be popped out. Then if I push 8, then 8 will be pushed. So if I'm writing the, first I create the my stack object, let's say S. So this is the syntax of Java. In case of C++, you will just say my stack S. That is sufficient, right? Then we say S dot push 5. So 5 should be pushed in the stack. Then we say S dot push 3, then 3 should be pushed in the stack. Then we say, let's say cout S dot pop. So it should print 3. Now we again, let's say push maybe 8 here, 9 here, 7 here, and maybe 6 here. And then we use a syntax that while the stack is not empty, keep popping out and keep printing the values. So while not s dot is empty, we will do this. So the output should be 6, then 7, then 9, then 8, and then 5. Because stack is a last in first out data structure. All right. So if I'm implementing a myStack class, then before implementing the myStack class, this is the work that a QA will write, or this is the part of designing. Right? When we say designing, I mean that let's consider the people who are writing C++ compiler, or who are building C++. So don't think in terms of using C++, think in terms of creating C++, or think in terms of creating Java, because that is what the companies expect. The companies expect you to think from the point of view of creator of the technology rather than user of the technology. If you are thinking from the point of view of user of the technology, then you will have probably a 10,000, 20,000 rupees per month job. If you can think from the point of view of creator of the technology, then you will probably have a 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees per month job starting job, right? That's the difference. And normally what happens is that I have seen most of students, they think from using the technology and not from creating the technology point of view. So when you think from point of view of creating of technology, then you will appreciate certain things, and you will say that you will critically analyze how they have implemented things. You will not just learn how to use these things. So whenever a person is designing a stack class, let's say a developer sitting in Oracle who is building Java is thinking of designing this myStack class. So they will say that, okay, so myStack class should have a public function. Let's assume that we are always pushing integers in the stack. So it will have public void push function. Push function will take integer, and it should be able to push this value in the stack. Then we will have a public integer pop. So you can change the syntax according to C++. In C++, it will be like this, right? But it doesn't matter. So we have a public API pop, then we have a public API boolean is empty. So so this is how the people will be interacting, and obviously we'll have a public constructor myStack. So this is the API, or this is the interface of the class. Now the interface of the class is the most important thing. Before actually developing the class, we develop the interface of the class. And I don't know if you guys know, there is a job profile in Google, and it is in multiple companies. That job profile is called developer advocate. Developer advocate. So developer advocate, if let's say I am a developer advocate in Google, then I am not responsible for developing anything. I am a developer, but I will not be developing anything. My responsibility will be to ensure that the APIs are correct and the APIs are futuristic, right? So, and this is a very high paid profile with very senior people working there, and the responsibility of these people is to define the APIs. So an actual developer will be implementing the myStack class, but the developer advocate will come before the actual implementation, and he will be defining what the API should be. Now you can say that you can see if you see any problem in these APIs, right? We are not bothered about the implementation, whether the stack is actually stored on a linked list or on an array. The thing is that this is how the outside world will be interacting with the class, with the myStack. Now, outside world is interacting like this. Let's say this is the main function. In the main function, I am creating this, right? Let's say the developer advocate goes with this, that this will be the API, and this is how the people will be interacting. We are good, just implement it. So the actual developer will come and he will start implementing. So he will have a private class. So rest everything should be private. This is the only public API. Let me just mark it with another color. So this is the only public API that we have. All right. So public class, private class, maybe, node will have, so I'm just going with the linked list implementation. So node will have one integer data, one node pointer. Next, in Java, node pointer is node, right? Because this is the reference, right? If it is in C++, then you can make node pointer. Then there is one private node pointer top. So top is the top of the stack. This is top, right? When we initialize in the constructor, we should say that top is equal to null. All right. So top is equal to null. This is the implementation that we are doing. Top is equal to null. In push, we will just remove the head of the list. So push function will insert at the head of the list, and pop function will remove the first node of the list. So push function will be like, let's say node temp is equal to new node with value. Let's define a constructor also. So I'm trying to go really fast. If you have any questions, you can ask there. So data v, and next is, let's say, null. So we are defining the constructor so that this becomes easy. And then we say temp.next is equal to top, and top is equal to temp. So we are inserting a new value. So if we have a stack like this, 3, 5, top is pointing here, then if we are inserting a new value, let's say 8, so we create a new node 8, then next of 8 will be 3, and this is top. So it is like the linked list implementation of the stack class. Then next is the pop function. So pop function will always remove the last node, the first node. And then we have an isEmpty function. So isEmpty function will return true if the list is empty, otherwise it will return false. So it will return top is equal to null. So if top is null, then it will return true, otherwise it will return false, right? So before, if we are implementing the pop function, we should first be checking whether the linked list is empty or not, whether the stack is empty or not. If the stack is empty, then we should be throwing some exception, right? Stack empty exception. So, if we are throwing stack empty exception, it means that we should be adding this in the signature of the function also. So throws stack empty exception. And if we are adding it in the signature of the function, it means that we are changing the API. So if we are changing the API, it means that the API creator has not done a good job, because we are changing the API, right? So this is where the experience will come into picture, that an API developer should be able to think that maybe in the future we will be throwing some exceptions. So we should create the APIs like this, because imagine you are using the stack class of Java or stack class of C++. If the signature of the function changes, then everyone who is using Java or C++, they have to change their code. If the implementation change, then we don't have to change the code. But if the interface changes, then we have to change the code. Now we have to change the code here, and we have to put this pop inside try and catch, right? So interface and implementation, they should be separate from each other, right? Interface should be something which doesn't change very frequently, and implementation should be independent of interface, so that we can change the implementation without changing the interface, so that other people who are using our interface don't need to change their own implementation. So it happens with Java. Let's say you are using Java or C++, and what happens is that if a function changes. So if a function changes, then Java developer or C++ developer, they can't just remove the old function. They will probably deprecate the function, right? Because if they remove the function, then nobody across the world who is using that language will be able to update to the new SDK, right? So if you want my new SDK to be in compliance with the previous SDK, then I should be building on top of previous SDK. I should not be doing any minus in the previous SDK. I should be doing all plus in the previous SDK, right? I can change the implementation, because implementation doesn't matter. So in Java 8, they have changed the entire implementation of HashMap. right? Or if you consider C++, then they have changed the entire implementation of map class. Just that they have not changed the interface. So from the outside world, we are still calling the get function and the put function, but the internal implementation has completely changed. Imagine if I change this. Now, if I change this, instead of using linked list, I'm storing the stack in array. So I can change all of this as long as the function signature remains the same. So if the function signature remains the same, then this person does not need to change anything, because this person is only concerned about how it is using the stack. This person is not concerned about how the stack is storing the value or how the stack is internally handling certain things. So whenever we are creating interface, then interface should be very strong, very futuristic in nature. But the implementation can be done in a way that it is incremental and it is changing after some time. I'm not sure how much am I able to make myself clear, but the point is that those who create the interface, and interface include all of these things. Interface includes abstraction, interface includes the public APIs that we are exposing, and the things we are keeping private. So interface includes encapsulation. Interface includes obviously the type definition, which is the class. Interface also includes inheritance, right? I gave you a very small example, right? Let me see if I can do it. So let us have a look at the interface of Java as they provided in Java. Let us look at the interface of stack in Java. So this is the stack class in Java. This is not my code. This is Java code. This is the actual Java code, which is part of the binary, which is part of the Java language, right? Now in this you can see that they are extending stack to vector. So they have said that stack extends vector. Now when they say stack extend vector, because you are coming from C++ background, it actually means class stack public vector, right? So it means that the parent class of stack is a vector. When Java started building this stack class, then they go ahead with this particular implementation. Now this is not a natural implementation. This is a very bad implementation. And I am not saying it, right? You can say that you are saying it because you are not working in Java. I am not saying it. The Java guys are saying it, that this is not a good implementation, because here those who are using stack class may be creating an object of vector, and they may be putting they may be creating a reference of vector, and they may be putting a stack object inside this. So this is not a natural thing to do, because stack is not a vector. But now they cannot change it. So this was available since Java 1, right? So this is available since version 1.0. And since version 1.0, Java guys are saying that this is not a good design. This is not a good design. But it is hanging like an albatross around their neck, that they cannot change this design. They cannot change it, because if they change it, it means that the entire world has to change it, right? Because we don't know how many people will be creating the object of stack and putting it in the reference of vector. So imagine the impact of a bad API. So the impact of a bad API is such that even after decades, they are not able to change this particular implementation, even when they themselves say that this is not a good design. So that's why there are a lot of companies which are having a special position by the name developer advocate, and that position is responsible. People in that position are responsible for creating the APIs, only APIs. So in Google, there will be one developer advocate of Android. So that person will be responsible for the APIs of Android, because people are developing Android apps. So when they are developing Android apps, they are using the APIs of Android, right? Or Kotlin or Go, right? Similarly, in Microsoft, we have developer advocate for different APIs that are exposed to the public. Nowadays, more and more APIs are exposed to the public, because software is available as a service which can be used, right? For example, I am working in PowerPoint team, and in PowerPoint team, we have APIs that you can access if you want to open your PowerPoint presentation online. So those APIs are very, very important, right? The implementation is not that important, but those APIs are important. And when I'm saying API, I am talking about the entire object-oriented structure. I am talking about how they are inheriting. I'm talking about how they are encapsulating. I'm talking about the interface that they are exposing. I'm talking about the abstractions that they are having. I'm talking about how they are doing the polymorphism, everything. All right. I think I think I can stop here, because if I provide more details, then it'll I'm not sure whether it will be consumed in the same way. But let's say if I want to change this, then I can have an array. So I can have private integer array ARR, and top will be just integer. So it will not change anything. Initially top will be -1, and the is empty check will be that if top is -1, then don't do anything. The push function will be that ARR of plus plus top is equal to value. This is the push function, right? The pop function will be that return a value at top and then do top minus minus. So I have changed the entire implementation without changing the interface. So this function does not, this person who is using my class doesn't need to change anything, right? And implementation keeps changing with every version of the SDK, but interface doesn't change. All right. So with this, I am open to questions. Ma'am, you want to add anything to it?
Sir, let's take the question first. I request my students to ask questions regarding what all emerging technologies, as sir has well mentioned, regarding the software as a service, regarding the implementation. You should go creative. So I just want to emphasize, because he has more than 15 years of experience in companies like Microsoft and Adobe. So help you out in order to how you can progress or how you can move towards the place, or that is the outcome where we can say that this degree you are because of a career aspect. So I request my students to kindly unmute themselves, raise your hands and turn on the camera in order to ask any of the questions regarding the same. Vasudha ma'am, Subhas, if you want to add few lines to it, or ask the students to please.
Yeah, it was wonderful, and you have given a useful information for the students, because they are studying this subject. They have gone through the concepts which you have told, but the things which are related to the implementation part and how it is dealt in the industry, so that is a new concept to the students. And definitely students, if you have any kind of doubt, if you are crazy about how this object oriented programming has an approach in the industry, how it is being useful, and such kind of related questions you can definitely ask. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
We would definitely encourage the students who can ask questions regarding object-oriented theme, because you have completed all the modules like object-oriented features, you have completed with constructors, inheritance, polymorphism, exception handling. You have covered more of the
Right.
things apart from the syllabus.
Right.
So as all our students are moving towards the end of the same semester, second is the last working day for them. So it would be that they have done completion with the syllabus and started with the preparation for the exams also, because major is also approaching. So I think there must be many questions in the students' mind. Could I ask, as per the alphabetical order, could I request the students if they can ask question, or I can take the names randomly? Abhinav, Pratap, Abhijay, Avichal. Okay, I found one hand raised by Avichal. Yes, Avichal, could you unmute yourself and turn on your camera, please? Avichal, am I audible? That's great. We have 177 students now as the participant list. But yeah, Avichal, can we hear from you? I found hand raised by Saksham Singh, and Gunjan has also raised. I request Saksham to unmute and turn on the camera, please.
Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm not sure about the camera. I'm having a really bad network today.
Okay.
No problem. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, the session was great. Thank you for it. Uh, what I was asking is, you were telling about the whenever a new version of a language comes, for example, whenever a new version of C++ comes,
Mhm.
then some libraries or some functions get deprecated.
Mhm. Right.
So, exactly as you said, they can't remove it because then everybody will have to change their code accordingly.
Right.
So, what happens in the deprecation? Does it go down like in a gradual manner or something like that, or it stays always?
See, that's where the challenge is, right? So look at it from the point of view of the company who is building those APIs, right? So there is no deadline as such that after which this function will become deprecated. But deprecated essentially means that the company is not supporting this function at all, right? And maybe in some future version this function will stop coming. Now it depends on function to function. So let's say this particular thing, so this particular thing need to be hard pushed, right? So there are some functions which need to be deprecated and which need to be removed, right? So it means that your change is, so I am changing the implementation. If I am changing the implementation in a way that the previous function becomes irrelevant, then I have to remove the function in the next version, right? So this is like a very hard change, right? If I'm changing
Okay,
the
sir.
implementation, right? So hard changes are always avoided, right? And that's where the API is important, because your API should be futuristic in a way that hard changes should not come, right? Because if hard changes
Yes,
come,
sir.
then they have to deprecate the function then and there with the next version itself, right?
Yes,
But
sir.
if they are the changes which are more incremental in nature, and with which maybe the person can live for certain time, right? So I can see deprecated functions which are deprecated even two decades before in Java, and still those functions are present in the next SDK, right? The point was
Yes, sir.
that these deprecated functions are like a very negative thing which is hanging around the developers of Java, because they cannot get rid of this, and they know that this is not good, and they know that this is not even working right now, right? But still they cannot remove it because of the backward support that they have to provide, right? So if the API developers are more futuristic in nature, then those number of deprecated functions will be minimum. That was the idea, right? And this API, the goodness of the API does not necessarily come from senior person. Sometimes it comes from very junior folks. I can give you a very specific example. The Java SDK, the Java 8 version has changed their Java map implementation, and they are claiming that the new Java map, Java hash map is 20% faster than the previous version of Java hash map. And the change in the new version of Java hash map is such that any person who is coming straight from the college can suggest that change, right? So the impact of that change is high, and that change is such a simple change. So don't think that you someday you will become senior and only then you will be able to contribute in the API development. So you can provide your suggestions in the API development right from day one, right? So far as deprecation is concerned, there is no rule to deprecation, that when will the function will be deprecated. There are some functions which are staying for 2 decades. There are some functions which have to be discontinued in the next version itself.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Yes.
sir.
sir. Thank you, Saksham. Show your hand now. I
Can I
request
ask a
Chirag to
question?
turn on camera. Yeah, Avichal, you are audible now. Could you turn on your
Yes,
camera
ma'am.
now?
Ma'am, my
Yeah.
camera is on. Good morning, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask, as you said that there was a specific case in Java where a vector was inheriting from stack. So can we give users the option to change the implementation of the language so that they can modify the API according to their own needs?
See, Java is an open source, right? Open source means that you can make changes whenever you want, but those changes will be available only to you, right? As a matter of fact, you can create your own MyStack class, right? And so rather than changing the SDK of Java, probably a much simpler thing is that you create your own MyStack class, and inside your company you will be using that class. And most of the companies does that. Most of the company does not use the type straightforward from the SDK. So they have their own interface in between, right? For example, let's say I have an interface which is integer 64, right? So it means that this integer 64 is a type which will ensure that this will allocate 64 bytes to integer, right? Now it is possible that such a type is not available in the C++ language, right? So if such a type is not available in the C++ language, then this is a class which I will implement. And if such a type is already available in the C++ language, then this will be just a type definition, type def, right? But in my entire code, so let's say this is my code. In my entire code, I will not be using integer x. I will be using integer 64x, right? So that tomorrow, if in the new version of C++ they are supporting this integer 64, then I just need to change this. I don't need to change the entire code, right? So a lot of companies does that. A lot of companies does that they have their own interface. They don't use the type of the language as it is, right? So if I'm using Java, I will never use stack. I will use my stack, and maybe I will, inside my stack, I'm using stack only, the Java stack. But I have the flexibility that tomorrow, if I want to change my stack, then I can do it only at one place, so that the entire company code don't need to change, right? But to answer your question, those changes will be only for my specific company. I can't say that this is the new version of Java. That control is with Java people only, right? I can't say that this is Java 9, right?
Okay, sir. Sir, got it. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vichal. You can show your hand. I request Chirag to unmute and turn on the camera. You can ask question now, Chirag.
Yes, good morning, ma'am, and good morning, sir, as well. So, sir, basically my question was like at our particular level, like our student level, we are in second year right now. So we always want to create some new projects or maybe some application or something like that. So like I was trying to do something like this, but the point is that in theory it's pretty simple to think about stuff, and you just I think that it's okay. For example, let me take like my personal experience that I wanted to create a responsive web page. So I thought, okay, I need to know the front end development, and then I need to write the back end of this particular thing. But when you get into the thing, the learning curve is pretty steep. At our level, what projects would you suggest that we should go into, like which is not very complicated as well, but gives us a nice idea of the entire thing?
All right, great. So we can take this question outside object-oriented programming, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Give you a general suggestion. See, you are in your second year, right? So whenever you are creating a project, you should think of creating a project from 2 points of views. One point of view is that how much learning is that project adding to your acumen, right? Right. So let's say you are learning some new technology. Let's say you are learning to build website. So how much is it adding to your own learning, right? This is one. Second is that you should start thinking about your resume from this point only, right? So when you are probably at the end of your third year or starting of your fourth year, then companies will be visiting your campus. So when companies visit your campus, then the first thing that the company will look at is your resume. When the company is having a placement preparation drive, placement drive, right? So if you are creating a project which is not adding any value to your resume, then try to do it really fast and just get the value out of it, that you are learning from this, and then dump it, right? But if you think that project is good enough and it can be added in your resume, then you should start thinking about that project from that point of view, right? So thinking from that point of view means that you should be putting that project in some repository, maybe on GitHub or Bitbucket, wherever you are comfortable. And second thing is that you should have a nice outlook for that particular project, so that you can talk about that project in your interview, right? And you should be adding that project in your resume right now, right? For example, let's say you are implementing B trees. Have you done the B tree in C++ or in Java or in data structure?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In data structures.
Right? In data structure, you must have done B trees, right? Now, B tree, it's not that it's a very complex thing. Obviously, it is reasonably complex if you compare it with trees. But the usage of B tree is huge, right? In all the indexing, we use B tree or B plus trees and all, right? So if you provide it a nice touch, and if you say that, implemented B plus trees for used in indexing, right, to enhance searching, then this can become a project which you can mention in your resume, right? You can't mention that, I have implemented quicksort in your resume, right? It doesn't make sense, right? But this is a reasonably good assignment which can be mentioned in your resume. So what happens is that at the end of 3 years, right, you can look at the resume of your seniors, and you can see that, okay, so this resume looks very shallow, maybe, right? So let's say you look at a resume and you see that, this resume doesn't have any assignments or any projects, right? On the other hand, you have a resume that is mentioning 10 assignments or 10 good projects. It is possible that both the people have worked on the similar kind of projects, right? So whenever you are creating a project, you should be thinking from that point of view also, right? So learning is one, resume building is another, right? The third thing is that, whenever you are creating a project, you should try and put all different concepts that you have learned from outside. So if you are writing a tree, if you are building a tree class, or if you are writing a tree function, binary tree function, then you should not be looking at that as a only binary tree function. You should bring in the object-oriented programming concepts into that, right? That I will create a tree class, and from that tree class, so that will be abstracted, right? So for that assignment, the requirement is not to create a tree class. But when you extend your requirements and when you bring in the concepts from elsewhere and put those concepts there, then the overall learning actually enhances. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Let me give you one example. Let's say you are learning operating system, right? I'm not sure whether you had your operating system class or not, right? Have you got a chance? Have you already had your operating system paper?
No, sir. They will be having in next semester.
All right.
Not
So
yet.
so when you learn operating system, then in operating system there is a concept called multi-threading, right? In DBMS there is a concept of transactions, and both the concepts are related, right? So whenever you are implementing multi-threading in operating system, you should think of implementing transactions in DBMS or the other way around, because the critical section is same, the synchronization is same, everything is same, right? So think of computer science as a whole. Don't think in silos. That is what my suggestion will be.
Sir, we have been joined by our HOD, that is HOD of Computer Science and Engineering, Professor Sanjeev Thakur, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. I welcome you. And what I am seeing is a very good C++ techniques you are saying and explaining about the project. So I welcome you, sir. And I will be leaving soon because I have a class. You may continue, sir. Thank you very much for joining and giving insights to our students.
Sure. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, the last question I must take because we are running out of the time by Sarthak. I found hand raised by Sarthak. Sarthak Bharadwaj, could you unmute yourself and turn on your camera? The last question, other students will be requested to post the query on chat window, please, because we have a lot of time. Yes, Sarthak.
Okay, first of all, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, my topic of interest is specifically is game engine and game development. So, game nowadays are having multiple layers of system like rendering, objects, physics, artificial intelligence, and high-level scripting and backend. And there are many high-level languages such as Java, which is used in gameplay programming. But even Java uses a library which is a C++, which is a C++ library generally. And in Python, we use Pygame, which also uses some C++ libraries too. So generally, why do we consider C++ as the best suit for gameplay programming and making game engines?
Okay, good question. So one thing is that C++ does not have a layer between the programming language and the system underneath, right? Java has a layer, right? So between your code and between the system there is JVM, right? So sometimes what happens is that this JVM becomes a restriction, right? Both in terms of performance as well as in terms of implementation, right? Sarthak, you're there?
Yes, sir, I'm
Sarthak
listening.
is-
So I was saying that sometimes, so between Java and between the underneath system, you have the layer of JVM, which is not in your control, right? So if this is not in my control, I can only write a code here, right? If I am writing a code here and I want a very high performance from the system, then this JVM may become a bottleneck. This JVM may does not allow you to provide the high performance, right? For example, let's say you are writing Android development. You are developing Android applications. So if you are developing Android application, then you may be developing the view in either Java or Kotlin, right? Or let's say let's say you are having iOS development. So in iOS development, you may be developing the front end in Objective C, right? But these things may become a bottleneck. So what happens is that if you are into performance intensive applications, then you, even for Android application, you develop that application in C++ and you directly compile it and run it at the native layer rather than running it at the application layer, right? So in Android, you have an application layer here, and then you have a native layer here. The application layer is all written in Java. The native layer is all written in C++, and then you have a Linux here, right? This is the kernel, right? So if you are writing C++, then you are already here, right? So you are very close to the system. So if you are so close to the system, then you can use the positives and you can use the positives and negatives of the system in your favor, right? For example, I was in this OneNote team, in Android OneNote team. So when I was in the Android OneNote team, we were doing a lot of programming in C++, right? So we were doing a lot of programming in C++, and we used to compile that at the native level, right? So this is one. Second is, when you are developing a Java game, when you are developing a game, your game, I am assuming you are talking about online game, right?
No, sir. The
Offline.
GPU intensive offline games, GPU intensive games.
If it is GPU intensive, it means you are already talking about C++, right? Because it is closer to the system, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
let's say you are developing an offline game. So what you want is that you don't want to implement the game from scratch for different platforms, right? Maybe Android is one platform, iOS is one platform, right? Or maybe desktop is one platform, right? And maybe web is another platform, right?
Yes.
So you don't want 4 different implementations, but the view technology of all 4 of them is different, right? Maybe for Android you will be using Kotlin, if not Java. Nowadays, Java is not used. Here you are using maybe Objective C++ or Objective C, right? For desktop, I don't know, right? There are plethora of technologies, so you may be using one technology or the other. In the web, you may be building the front end maybe in React.js or whatever, right? So this is only the view part, right? If you write the controller, the core gaming logic in any of these technologies, then that may not be accessible to the other world, right? So you don't want your controlling logic, you don't want to be writing your controlling logic at 4 different places in 4 different technologies, right? With Vue, you don't have any option, right? So what you do is that you write the main controller in C++ or the main engine in C++, right? So this C++ can be accessed from Kotlin also using JNI, right? Because there is a Java layer in between. This also can access this C++, this also can access this C++, and this also can access this C++, right? If you take one level further, then you put this C++ at the server side, and the clients are accessing the C++ world through an HTTP interface, right? So these are the two reasons according to me. One is because C++ is more closer to the native place because of the nature of C and C++, because they provide you a lot of control to handle the system. And second is that you can have a common C++ layer which can be accessed by different technologies which you have at the front end.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right? I give you a specific example, maybe 1 more minute, right? you see this part, right? On the top of OneNote, right? I
Yes,
can
sir.
select the font, I can select the font size, I can select bold, right? All of these things, this paint brush, right? The color and all, right? This is exactly same in PowerPoint also. This is exactly same in Word also. This is exactly same in Excel also. And this is the same in OneNote also, right? So at Microsoft, we don't have different implementations of this particular layer for different products. So we have one implementation for all of these, and that implementation is being used by these different products, right? Now imagine the technology where that implementation should be, right? So C++ becomes a natural choice for that technology.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Right?
With this, we conclude this session. So
All
on
right.
behalf of Opportunity and Department of CSC Asset, I thank you so much, sir, for such an informative and interactive session where you explained and touched upon all the aspects like exception handling, constructors, features of OOPS, the Java, cloud as a service, the interface, and the implementation. And I really emphasize towards the particular phrase where you have added the students must be creating the technology. They must not focus on how to use the technology. So once again, thank you so much, sir, for such an
So
interactive and knowledgeable session.
Thank you, ma'am. I am writing my email ID and this is my personal phone number. So if any student has any question related to either the projects or how the placement should be or how to prepare for different things, feel free to reach me. Right? I like interacting with people.
I request every student to turn on the camera so that we can have a virtual group photograph. Can we please? A virtual group photograph. I request everyone to kindly turn on their camera, please. Sir, you can stop sharing this screen now so that we can move to the gallery mode. Thanks, Arthur. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yes, please hurry up. We will be running late for the next class you might have. So I request everyone to turn on the camera and we can switch for gallery mode to take a group photograph. Hurry up. Yes, fast, please. I request each student who have 174 as of now attendees. We have joined with few more students. It's 180. So I request everyone to turn on the camera so that we can have a group photograph.
Yes, hurry up, students. We have another class as well.
Yeah, Vasudha ma'am, I request you to kindly print the screenshot option, please, so that we have a good amount of photographs. Yeah. Yeah, Arshad, I request you also. Subhas sir, please, if you can take the print screenshot.
Yes, ma'am, did that.
Dear students, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Stay safe. Take care. Sir, I will be sharing the recording with you also. Thanks. Thanks, Magan. Thanks to Vasudha ma'am. Thanks to
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Yeah, thanks to you also.
Thank you, ma'am.
Arshad contributed. Thank you. Thank you. Well coordinated, Arshad. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. I'm stop sharing the video recording. Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Vasudha ma'am. Thanks so much.